Let us proceed, if we may. Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to the special closed session meeting of Monday, September 11th, 2023. I'll call the meeting to order at 5:30. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Claudia Arona.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Elizabeth Arona.
Here.
Mayor Infante.
Here.
Look at the blue and the black.
What's that?
Blue and black.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, it's a perfect time. If you'll lead us, please, Ms. Arona.
Sure, please stand and face the flag. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
bless you.
Delay.
Okay, Mr. Attorney, if you would introduce this session, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City Council will meet in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, Subdivision D4, on a conference with legal counsel on one item of potential litigation.
Thank you. At this point, we will recess into there's no public comment. I presume there's nobody here, so we'll recess into closed session. Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting of the City Council, September 11th, 2023. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:30, excuse me. I'll get to read that clock right correctly one of these days. Roll call, please. I know.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Claudia Arona.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Elizabeth Arona.
Here.
Mayor Infante.
Here. Mr. Brown, if you'd lead us in the pledge, please.
Thank you. Please rise in remembrance of 9/11 and all the other flags at half-staff. It's our privilege today to say, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good job, Dave.
Before we commence this evening, I would like to ask for a moment of silence for the thousands of people that were killed in 9/11. So if we may do that for a moment. Thank you.
I have your corn on the cob. Would you like me to heat that up for you?
No, I can't do it.
Oh,
Somebody on Zoom has their microphone on? It's corn on the cob. It sounded good. You know, here we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for that moment of silence. I would also like to make a proclamation that September 21st, 2023 is a day of peace. And whereas life is better in a world where peace exists, and whereas International Day of Peace is celebrated annually on September 21st, and whereas the International Day of Peace is intended to promote all efforts to bring greater peace at home and throughout the world, and whereas the City of Solvang supports all efforts to promote peace in the city and throughout the greater San Ynez Valley. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Mark Infante, the mayor, along with the City Council of the City of Solvang, California, do hereby proclaim the day of September 21st, 2023 to be the Solvang Day of Peace and encourage its citizens to look to those who have been peacemakers and peacekeepers to learn what we can do individually and in concert with others to make the world a more peaceful place. In witness thereof, I have hereunto set my hand and have caused the official seal of the City of Solvang to be affixed on this 11th day of September 2023. Rich Nagler. Ah, there he is. Here's the proclamation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Rich,
Yeah,
do you want to say a couple words
I could say a couple words.
about peace proclamation?
Is this on? This was done in conjunction with Rotary Clubs International and as originally endorsed by the United Nations. And it's interesting that on September 11th is when we get this proclamation for September 21st. And what we're trying to promote is peace. The United Nations has declared that possibly we could have 24 hours of peace. It's more than we have, in any other day of the year. And cease violence and people understand what's going on in the world and try to create a better place. In Rotary, we try to do that. Dave Brown is also a member of our Rotary Club in Los Olivos, and we try to do that through international and local projects that clean water, education, scholarships for people. We have peace scholarships, so Rotary is really, really part of this hope that we can create more peace throughout the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rich. I appreciate that. All right. At this time, we have a presentation by Lieutenant Valencia on the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office Annual Report. It's all yours, Mark.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Valencia with the Sheriff's Department. I'm also the Chief of Police of Solvang, for those of you who don't know. And this is just going to be our end of the year. Understand this is from July to July. So there's not going to be a lot of 2023 stats, but the 2022 stats will be current. And as we go over this, we can, I'll update you as necessary. And if you could hold all questions to the end, and I'll address any concerns we have. Let's see here.
There we go.
So we understand what Part 1 crimes are going to be the heavy crimes, the felonies, and the Part 2 crimes are going to be less than, or a felony reduced down, a wobbler, so to speak, which can be reduced to a misdemeanor. So from 2021 to 2022, there has been an 18.6 decrease. Part 2 crimes, there's been 11.2 decrease, with our traffic collisions down 14%. Our calls for service, there's been a 6.9 decrease. Although our calls for service in 2022 are 87, this is homeless activity only. And I realize that's going to be a hot button topic, so I'll get through this, but our stats are slowly rising on our homeless crimes. So we took, in 2022, 39 reports, and we made 20 arrests compared to the previous year at 16. With the homeless activity calls for service from 2019 to 2020, all the way to 2022, as you can see, there is a slight decrease in the activity, which is kind of seen across the United States. In comparison, we're relatively the same based on our population and our demographics. So in 2019, we had 101, and in 2022, we had 87 calls for service. But the reports taken, there were more reports taken, so instead of just a subject disturbing, there was an actual incident that needed to be documented, if that makes sense. And if you can see in 2022, the citations were higher. So our Part 1 crimes, now I've included 2023 as of to date. So if you can see, we had 7 violent crimes in 2022. In 2023, as of January, we've already had 5. And then our property crimes, if you can read that okay, I know it's quite the distance. We had 53 in 2022, and as of 2023, we're at 41. So we can anticipate, based on the remainder of the year, that we will be close to, if not be past our last year's numbers. So if you look at violent crimes again in 2022, we're at 12. If you look at homicide, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault, understand a lot of sex crimes and sex crimes against juveniles will not be reported on this report. DOJ has a requirement that we don't release that information to the public as of right now. So our property crimes, our burglaries, we're at, in 2022, we're at 70. 2021, we're at 83, and I don't have the numbers for this year because this year's not complete yet. As you can see, our Part 1 crimes from 2019 to 2022 have actually dropped, with 2021 being our highest year in the last several years. So our Part 2 crimes. Now, I know that's hard to read. Just understand that I won't go line by line unless you want me to, but we're comparable to the previous years, if that makes sense. So we're still status quo, and I'll go into a little bit about that in just a minute. So our Part 2 crimes, as of 2022, we did 165. 2021 was a bigger year. I'm going to say that a lot of that had to do with COVID and the businesses being closed, and a lot of things were getting stolen. And plus, we've had the catalytic converter theft ring broken up, and the bicycle thefts have gone down because we had those rings in the area that we were working for, both Builton and Solvang. So they both show comparable stats of the drop once we were able to break up one of the catalytic converter rings and the bicycle theft rings. So broken down, the drugs, the drunkenness, DUIs, liquor laws, simple assaults, vandalism, and weapons. as you can tell, 2019 was a big year. 2020, it's kind of all over the board based on what the current trends are. And I'm not going to break that down line by line because we don't have the time on that. But for the city of Solvang calls for service, 2019, as you can tell, we had 5,067 calls for service. Those are 911 calls. And in 2022, we were down to 4,456. I did last year's presentation, so it showed a decrease. And this year would have 5 months from July to December to get the complete stats, which will be on next year's. So I kind of want to open this up to questions and comments about the crimes or City of Solvang crimes. One of the things that I focus on as the Solvang police chief appointed by the sheriff's department is that, of course, my primary concern is going to be the citizens of Solvang. And then in making and presenting a safe city, that, of course, increases the tourism because they want to be here. So my focus is going to be primarily on the citizens in the community of Solvang, and then we address the tourism issues. The number one complaints I'm getting right now through the office is going to be about homelessness and traffic. I'm getting a lot of complaints about traffic throughout the city. As you guys know, our staffing levels are low, so what I didn't present were initiated calls for service, if that makes sense. So that's a deputy who's pulling cars over and checking. I think our numbers would be up if we had more deputies doing that. But because we're short-staffed across the central stations, it's not just here, it's actually across law enforcement. We're not able to initiate a lot of traffic stops and a lot of things we would like to do because we're backed up on call logs, and those are regular calls for service, if that makes sense. So if there aren't any questions from anyone or anyone in Zoom?
Do we have any council members with questions? Staff report. I have just one.
Yes,
what
sir.
about graffiti?
You know, we haven't seen, so the graffiti has been unique to say the least. It's not gang related. We have seen graffiti. What I've seen lately and the complaints I get is, I guess, I'm not sure who's doing it. They're happy rocks or something along those lines, and they have motivational sayings on them, and they're placed throughout the city.
Really?
I'm not sure what they're called. Do we know? Happy rocks, that's what I call them because I see them. I've also seen them that are not happy, to say the least. So yes, we see a lot of that. We do see graffiti, but it is absolutely not gang oriented. It is just local taggers and it's small potatoes. It's nothing on where they're causing permanent damage that we can't fix. So we're not seeing vandalism, if that's what you're referring to, like we used to. It just hasn't hit Solvang like.
Thank you very much. Now, in the audience, then,
I have a question.
Mr. Homburg in the back.
Can I ask a question before we go?
I'm sorry.
To the
Go
group. Hey, Mark, first of all, thank you. Appreciate getting the data. And I have a question, but before I do, I want to thank you for everything you and your deputies do every single day, 24 hours a day. Thank you, because I hope the community feels a lot safer and better for having you at the helm. On the data, do we have any insights as to the concentration of some of the activity increases we're seeing? You mentioned the breakup of a catalytic converter ring, but is there repeat offenders or a concentration of location or something that would say there's something specific we could do to take action on to continue to reverse this trend?
Well, I have several ideas that some of the other cities have done, such as like the Ring Doorbell program. And right now the focus is shoplifting, which is a big issue. As you know, we're dealing with now. So the way it works in LA, which is normally where we're getting our crews from, and the burglary crews and the rest of them, they kind of circulate through Southern California and they commit their crimes. So once we break up a catalytic converter thief, then a different crew will move in, like the bicycle thieves that we were dealing with here and at the trailer park there in Gilton. So then we break that crew up. Well, now we're dealing with the liquor thieves. And we've had our Rite Aid, our CVS, and the one in Gilton all hit in one night, and it was thousands of dollars. And it was an organized, very well organized attempt. Now, we did catch all of them, but it was very well organized. So now it's on to the next. With social media working the way it is, they can target a location, which is usually at closing time. They're also smart enough to know that our shift work, our hours, and the things that we do and when we're available, and scanner information's open, so they know when the deputies are working and where they're not. So yes, we are seeing a trend where different crews are coming in and committing their crimes and then leaving. The advantage we have is the 246 is one way in and out, and the 101 is one way in and out, and they seem to not know that. So that's kind of worked out in our favor. It takes us a little bit, but we'll get there. So we like to keep that up if we can. But there's several things we can discuss whenever you'd like to. The Ring doorbell program, the camera systems, just different ideas that other cities are now doing. And you can also link with, say, Buellton, if that's the case, in addressing the camera issues. And the CHP, our partnership hasn't been better in all the years I've worked here. Their commander, Lieutenant Zivic, and I have been working cases now side by side instead of the old range wars that we used to have with this is your area, this is our area. We've changed all that, and it's really been effective where we had the pursuit through the city a couple nights ago, and it woke up a lot of people, but the crash ended up in Los Olivos, and there was a lot of jurisdictional issues, but we were able to work it out amazingly. So law enforcement is progressing as best we can, but there are trends that are current, and it's hard to keep up with them, but once we do, we're kind of knocking it out of the park, so to speak.
Thank you very much. Anybody else on the council?
I do have one more question
Yes, ma'am.
regarding to the calls for service for homelessness. What happens once that an individual that is found illegally in camping or, doing something that, law enforcement can do something about? Do they get referred to services? Do they get cited and released? Do they get addressed? Do they get taken somewhere? What happens to individuals?
Well, it depends what the nature of the call is and where the call is actually. So with the new law, and I want to talk about, if we want to go down the road of homelessness, it can be a long night.
Yeah.
And I can address it with the audience, or I can address it now. But to answer your question quickly, if it's on private property, yes, we can cite with a complaint for trespassing 602, and we can have somebody actually arrested or cited. Right now, the jail, we're not booking like we used to, so they essentially get a citation. But if it's committing a crime under the influence, or if it's a mental health issue too, that we see a lot of that, and I can explain the whole history, I'm prepared for that if we need to, that if it's a mental health issue, then mental health is not a crime. Homelessness is not a crime itself. They're citizens of the United States and have the same civil rights that we do. So we have to respect those rights as law enforcement. We can't be selective in the laws we enforce, and that's the way the laws are written now. So it just depends on the nature of the call and the nature of the crime. Homelessness itself is not a crime.
Okay, thank you.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else up front? Mr. Holmberg, yes.
Yes, sir. Thank
Oh,
you.
come on up to the microphone, please. There isn't, well, I don't know. Yeah, I know.
Thank you.
This is just for this question here. Go
So
ahead.
it's just a comment and a question also for the lieutenant, but I think you're the third lieutenant. You're the third city manager that I've requested that maybe we can get a motor cop. Apparently, my understanding is the sheriff's department, we have one officer for the city of Solvang. I don't know if anybody knows that, but we only pay for one officer, and I think it's $2.6 million a year. And if we want to have a part-time motor officer who does traffic, because the one deputy we have is not certified in anything traffic-related unless it's a rolling stop or someone passes him going the speed limit. He does not have the ability to do LiDAR or any of that training for speed. So the big problems with speed are not 246. The big problems are the egress and exits into town from workers and students on Chalk Hill, Friedensborg Canyon, Viborg, and Alisal. Those are not addressed. They haven't been addressed for a long time. And I've talked to Brad Vidro. I've talked to Miss Bradford when she was here.
This was
about
supposed
getting-
to be a question for the officer?
Well, yeah, I'd like to see if is there a possibility that we could get a part-time motor officer just to strictly do traffic 2 or 3 days a week, not necessarily on the weekends, but like during the week. That was my question. And then the other thing is 3 years ago there was an opportunity, because we only have one deputy, to get cameras on 246. And that would help the deputies and the sheriff's department identify potential shoplifters or stolen cars or whatever. And it was knocked down by council. And I'd like to bring that back up again for the lieutenant to talk about that maybe we get cameras because Paso has them.
That's up to us.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you very much for
Cascadero
your
has them,
comments.
and San Luis has them.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
You
And-
want to answer the,
Yeah, to answer that question is, that's up to the city to negotiate with the sheriff's department if they're going to fund a motor spot.
right?
Buellton does have one that we haven't filled due to staffing, and that is, I'm not allowed to negotiate contracts for the sheriff's office. I just work with the resources that they provide, but that is not the only complaint I get. We do have a lot of complaints on speeders. I try to put the patrol car, they are more visible, and I can tell you our traffic violation citations are up. We have been writing more tickets in the city of Solvang, but with one deputy, and I have to post them at the school, and then they have to answer calls. We just, we can't be everywhere at one time, but we are putting the miles on the car, so to speak, if that
Thank
makes
you.
sense.
Is there another question? Would you come to the podium, please?
Thank you for your service. Always good to know you guys are around. So my question is, you made a comment that it's not a crime to be homeless and it's not a crime to be mentally ill. Unfortunately, it's known that a lot of these people do commit crimes. And if you're short-staffed and crimes are going up, what is being done to curb this? Simple question. I mean, the statistics are not going in the right direction.
We can talk about homeless. So understand in 2014, Assembly Bill 109 transferred the responsibility of housing certain criminals from state prison to the county jail facilities. Follow me with this one, please. Local jail facilities were already full, which resulted in the early release of 45,000 low-level criminals. Prop 47 in 2014 was approved by 60% of the voters, which changed crimes like shoplifting, theft, or forgery, and possession of illegal drugs like cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine from felony offenses to misdemeanor offenses. Now, I have extensive experience in narcotics and narcotics investigations, and I can anytime explain how narcotics affect the brain has created the mental illness, which is now when they're released on the street because it's reduced from a felony to a misdemeanor, and people are released on the street who are have been affected by long-term drug use, that's going to create homelessness numbers. So Prop 57 allowed the state complete authority to release up to 30,000 inmates from state prisons back into our communities. So now we have a large release of inmates that were in custody for felony offenses that got reduced to misdemeanor offenses are now released on the streets of California. Some of them do have mental health issues or are homeless because of the early release or whatever their circumstances may be. And if they're affected by the drug use or the crimes that they're committed, I'm not allowed to take a shoplifter to jail anymore. It's 459.9. It's essentially a shoplifting section. I give them a citation and I'm on to the next call. So this is when I discuss that we can't be selective in the laws we enforce. These are the laws that are in place. I won't go any further unless there's other specific questions about homelessness, but I can. We can discuss this in depth if need be.
That's going to be a subject that we're going to address here shortly, so I'd prefer that we didn't go any farther
Yes,
with
sir.
the homelessness and we stick with the law enforcement. I think we have two more questions. Yes, ma'am?
Please step forward and state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Renee Condit. Thank you for your service. Unfortunately, I've had to call the Sheriff's Department 3 times in the last 4 months because of, and I'm assuming that they were homeless. 3 men between their 20s and 30s down by our house were below the mission. One threatened to kill my friend and then kill my dog, and he was a scary dude. Another one whacked out. Now, I don't know how you tell the difference between mentally ill and on some kind of drugs, but you guys hauled them away in the back of your car. And the other they couldn't find by the time they got there, which was quick. I was told by someone that the homeless situation has really increased since they've begun serving them meals at the senior center in Buellton. Do you know anything about that? Yes, and have you know statistically, or have you talked to other police that you know about that you think that maybe that since they're being fed now, that more have come and that's created maybe a bigger problem?
Yes.
Yes, that's, okay, thank you.
It's also not a crime in the state of California for them to be fed.
No, I'm not, everybody needs to be fed. It's just, it's interesting to me that I've lived here my whole life, and I've never had to call 911, especially 3 times in a 4-month period with my life being threatened. So it's interesting, what brings them in is maybe something we need to look at, why they're coming.
Thank you very much. Just a moment, CJ, we had one more question before you.
Thank you for your service. My question is to you about, we already have traffic problems, so with all the increased growth and the low income housing that's coming, especially in the Alamo Pintado area, are there any plans to deal with that?
Which plans?
For the increased low income housing on Alamo Pintado?
Nothing's been
The 3-story
approved.
building?
Which one?
On Alamo Pintado and Viborg, there's 3-story high buildings that are coming up for low income and
Those have not been approved. Those haven't even come before the planning commission yet.
Okay, well, I'm asking with traffic, you know, do we have concerns?
Once they approve it, then they have to actually bring it to the sheriff's office.
Okay.
They submit a plan, like when Gilton has a planning program.
Yeah.
They have to come to me and actually do a survey.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
CJ?
TJ Jackson, and I'm not going to ask about homeless now because I expect it to be a discussion item later. I have 2 questions for you. One, the sheriff has acknowledged that fentanyl is an issue in Santa Barbara County, and I know that that has been mentioned as a priority. I have been told that it has made its presence known in the San Ynez Valley, and would love to hear what your approach has been. Secondly, in experiencing criminal turning in or reporting, I've had 4 reports that have been turned on my property down at LSL. Each one of them was responded to. Each one of them was dealt with in a professional fashion, and the perpetrators were removed. So properly noticed, it appears your people know what to do and they get it done. And I've had that experience. But my question, as it has arisen here, is the process for establishing level of service and the cost of the level of service for public safety in the valley. When does that come before you for a decision? And is there room for a vigorous public participation to assess whether or not there is sufficiency in what is being budgeted for public safety, given A, the increase in the tourist population that we have, the expanded business, and a host of other elements? One of the questions arose about one officer for traffic. What I think would be helpful would be to empower the citizens to participate and recognize that when they groan about taxes or when they groan about costs, that a true discussion about level of service happens. I'd like to know when that happens and when you provide it to the council.
Well, thank you for your compliments on the deputies. We are working on the homeless issue, as you know. It is punching water, so to speak. In regards to the traffic issues, that is between the Sheriff's Department Contract Division and the City of Solvang. I'm simply the lieutenant that's given the resources provided by both the city and the sheriff's office, and I take those resources and make them work for the community. But as I said earlier, I spent 6 years in the Marine Corps. This is my 28th year with the sheriff's office. My entire adult life has been in service of either our country or our community. And I have placed the Solvang community first. In the year that I've been here, I know there's been improvements that we continue to work on, and we love working with the community, and we'll continue to do so as best we can. I have an open door policy. If anybody has any issues or concerns and wants to address them with me, they know they can do that.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the presentation and the time, Lieutenant.
Thank you.
Okay, now, Anna Marie, I don't have the list of. We are going to have public communications for non-agenda items and consent items. If you would introduce that, please.
Public communications, at this time, you may address the council on items not on the agenda and on consent. Time limit is 3 minutes. We will start with in-person public comments first.
Okay, before we get started, a couple of points. I know that a lot of you are here about the homeless and the camping ordinance. And we are going to pull that from the consent item and have some information presented to you. So I'd like to hold off on those comments until we do just that. I think it will save us a lot of time. So what I'm going to look for are people that are looking to make a public comment on something other than, what's 4F?
The agenda or the consent agenda.
Yeah, I've got a 4F in here for some reason. I didn't know what that was. E is the second reading. Okay. Yeah, these are all consent E. These are all the same thing. All right. I apologize. I know that one, but that was Mr. Homburg talking earlier. He already made his piece, said his comments. Okay. So let us first, the council, let's talk about the consent agenda. One of the things that I'm going to ask is that we pull this item E from the consent agenda. We need to have a little bit more information.
Time out.
Mr. Mayor, are you still entertaining public comment on non-agendized items and consent calendar other than 4E?
Yes, but I have no limit, no reports on those.
Okay, there may be some people online.
My apologies. Is there anybody in the audience or online that has a comment for any non-agenda items or consent items besides consent item 4E? Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Dave.
Renee Condit. Maybe this is just a statement or something, but on any item that is super important to everyone, I think it would be a great idea before anything is passed that you guys can hear comments or just statements.
Yes, ma'am.
Before you make this, go ahead and present your facts and then just make a decision on it.
That's not what will happen.
I want it all to be brought out so you guys have time to think about it.
Everybody will have a chance as soon as you hear the facts that we're going to present. Thank you. Okay, so I'm moving that we pull item 4E from the consent agenda. Questions, comments? Yeah. We should approve the other consent items since nobody's.
Mr. Mayor, we still have the public communication on non-agenda and consent items. The next thing that you would do typically is the city manager report and council comments and requests before you get to the consent agenda. If you'd like to move things out of order, council certainly can do that. But I did want to point out that the public communication portion is now closed. Then you would ordinarily have numbers 2 and 3 on the agenda.
Thank you. The public communications, nobody had anything to say on anything other than item 4E, and so we will close that and go on to the consent agenda, consent items.
No.
The city manager report?
Oh, I don't want to listen to him. My apologies. Go ahead, please, Randy.
I will be brief. I would like to announce bringing Rafael. I'm totally blank. Castillo? I apologize. I'm totally blanking on your last name. He is our new planning manager. Today was his first day. He feels that all you folks came to see him, so thank you for showing up. And he's here to say a few words and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you, Randy. My name is Rafael Castillo. I'm now the planning manager of the city of Solvang, so thank you very much for a humble welcome on the first day. Packed crowd tonight. Very concerned about this ordinance. So, but again, very appreciative to hear what these folks have to say, as well as, again, very appreciative to be here and very excited to begin to roll up our sleeves and get the work done that is before you, the council, as well as our community members and our business members that are a part of this excellent community. So thank you.
Comments?
Welcome,
Questions?
thank you. Glad you're here. Stick around for one.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Couple other quick things. I attended the Pirate football game on Friday night, dedication of Rio Field. That was kind of neat to watch. And the home team won, which was even better. And I will be attending a 3CE meeting in Paso Robles next week on Wednesday and Thursday. So if there's anything significant to come out of that, I'll update you all at the next council meeting.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Attorney, for keeping me online, or in line. Let's go back to the consent
Council.
agenda, please.
You want to take council comments?
On the city manager's report?
No,
You have
number 3 on the
comments?
agenda, council comments and requests. The next one on the agenda.
Yes, it is. My
We'll
apologies.
get you there.
I'm getting this, okay, council comments, and do we have any council comments?
I do.
I do.
Please, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, you go ahead.
Mine might go long, so.
Well, I have a couple. But,
Okay.
You go ahead.
First of all, I just wanted to make a request because I fielded a couple requests of late on the traffic and speed on Friedenberg Canyon. So would like staff to consider what we could be doing to put, performance or speed monitor on the road, both directions temporarily, just to make people aware. And if we could take a harder look at putting speed decals like we did on Viborg in that area, in that that entire corridor, we should think of as one connected, speedway that needs to be. Those folks need some help, especially as we move toward putting walkways or hiking trail on that particular part of the road. So that's one request. I also want to announce that I'm going to be participating in 2 critical meetings coming up next week. One, I think this audience is going to want to know about. One is a SPCAG meeting, and because I sit in on those Santa Barbara County sessions with the mayor, get exposed to other programs. And one I'd like to make the community aware of, which is, I think, going to speak to a hot topic tonight. And that is our participation. The city of Solvang has actually been included in a countywide, what we're calling the SURF program. It's the California Encampment Resolution funding. We're in round 2 of that program. It is a grant-funded program specifically targeted at the county's waterways and removing homeless encampments in the waterways. It's a most comprehensive program. Solvang gets to participate if you're not in one of the neighborhoods down near the San Ynez River. You may not be aware of the encampments that have taken root right after the January storm. And what the program will do for us is specifically rehouse and relocate and provide housing that's become available, incremental housing in the county, in Lompoc, Santa Maria, Isla Vista, and Santa Barbara. And those folks will be rehoused. Hopefully, the program kicks off next week. We think we're probably going to be experiencing that effort starting in October-ish timeframe. I'll know more next week. But the wraparound programs are pretty comprehensive. That means that anyone who is participating in that relocation and housing also gets a series of one-on-one counseling, one-on-one outreach, access to substance abuse programs, mental health, specific programs for veterans who also fall into this category, unfortunately, all too often. And it also provides training for the outreach individuals so they can handle increased workloads. They are given the skills to deal with mentally disabled or challenged individuals. And they are, I think, set up for the highest success rate for these individuals to find permanent housing and retraining back into the workforce. So the last thing here is that this program's unique. It's built on the at-home program from the County of Santa Barbara, also well-funded, but it is unique in that it's metriced, measured, and monitored, and it is for performance, for how successful the program will be. And it is refunded in the next year based on your success and performance metrics. So it looks to be a good program. We get the benefit of participating in that. It will specifically be, again, around the San Ynez River waterway, which I think, I've heard so much feedback over the last several months. it is probably the biggest challenge area for us in the city. So that's the good news.
Thank you. Mr. Clark?
Okay. I would like to bring up to the council, if you would go along with it, not to approve it, just to have it be discussed, that with the possibility of more restrictions coming down the pike from Sacramento or from the feds regarding COVID, that 7 states currently have gone on record to let the feds know that they will not go along with mask mandates and vaccine mandates should this come down from Sacramento again. Some cities have also taken this action to give a message to Sacramento that the city of Solvang, and I'm not asking for you to agree with me, just to be discussed between the residents and the council, to say to Sacramento that we will not mask our children again, we will not shut down our schools again, we will not shut down our city again, and we will not mandate vaccines unless somebody is positive for COVID. So, can I stop? Thank you. So thank you. I would like that to be discussed by council and let citizens have their say and go from there. I'm really, really afraid, especially for a city that is the 3rd most reliant city on tourism occupancy tax for our revenue that pays our bills, that especially with an election coming up, that we could be shut down again, and it scares the heck out of me, folks. I didn't say the H-E-L-O word. It scares the heck out of me, and I would like for that, if you would agree with me, to have that brought to a council to make a resolution that we would make that to the Assembly and to the government of California. So if I can get 2 other council members to go along with me that agree with me, great. If not, we know where everybody stands. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I do have a quick comment. So this week I will be attending the 3CE meeting as well. I serve on the policy board. That is a community aggregate that it's working on providing clean energy to the Central Coast. Most of the users that are customers of PG&E in the area have opted to collaborate with that effort as well. So I'll be reporting back on that. And just a note, I had a very interesting last couple of weeks. I spent 2 weeks working with Emergency Services Department for Black Road City, AKA Burning Man. I spent 2 weeks working with 250 emergency respondents, hearing calls, and after the flooding and the storms that came, I want to stress to the community how important it is to stay in touch with your local officials regarding an emergency preparedness program. The people that work together to make sure that everybody was okay, and we listened to what Emergency Services Department had to say, had a much easier time than the people that decided to be on their own and not collaborate with the department. So, and it made it a lot difficult to reach out to people that actually needed help during that emergency. So Solvang historically has done a great time on rallying all together in our time or meet. We are blessed with a community that care about all of their community members. So I just wanted to remind everybody that there are emergency protocols in the city, in the county. Take some time to check those out so that you know that you are prepared during a state of emergency. Thank you.
Can I interrupt for a second? Usually when a council member brings something up.
I'm going to bring that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know we were going on to other council members' comments.
Yeah, okay. So what we need to do at this point in time is Councilmember Clark has asked us to bring this to the council, his item to the council for a vote. Now, the question is, do we want to do that? And I just need a yes or no from everybody. Discussion? Yeah, discussion.
I'd be open to discussion.
Yeah, and me. Okay. So, Mr. City Manager, if you would put that on a future agenda.
We will do that.
Discuss that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Sorry? I'm sorry, I don't know which the item you're talking about.
I asked for speed monitors on framework.
Oh, I apologize. Yes, there was a question. There was a comment by Councilmember Arona to put speed monitors on Friedensburg Canyon. It's another discussion. Yes, sir.
So that came up during our conversation, I believe, on Friday, and I inquired of staff. We actually have 3 signs that we have previously purchased. So we are looking, Friedenborg Canyon being one of the locations we will look to install them as soon as we have adequate staffing, and that will be subject on for a agenda item later tonight.
Excellent. So we don't need to bring that back. It will be covered tonight. Thank you for bringing that up. I forgot you had mentioned that. Okay, now let's go back to the consent agenda, please. Again, I'm going to suggest that we pull item E, and we'll discuss that for a second before we allow the public to discuss it also. But we need to have an agreement that the rest of the consent items are approved as presented.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Claudia Arona.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elizabeth Arona.
Yes.
Mayor Infante.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Now, item 4E, which is obviously of great interest to this audience.
If I may read it, sir.
Please.
For second reading, adopt by title only, ordinance number 230369, removing section 625, amending section 7310, and adding a new chapter 6, camping of Title 5, Public Health and Safety of the Solvang Municipal Code to establish camping regulations in the city and making a determination of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act for second reading and adoption.
Thank you. Mr. Attorney, would you like to tell us why we're doing this?
I'll give you the brief story. Several years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a decision in the City of Boise case that prevented local agencies from arresting criminally individuals who are sleeping on public property. That's the short story. The case law has modified since then through the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And I should step back. The decisions that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court do apply in California, notwithstanding changes at the California Supreme Court. So these are cases that have been brought in federal court. So backing up, a lot of cities now are faced with looking at their existing camping ordinances and other ordinances dealing with how to address homelessness. City of Solvang has an ordinance that prevents camping under certain circumstances that I have concerns would be ruled unconstitutional if we prosecute under it. So with that in mind, we presented to the council at the last city council meeting an ordinance that is more state-of-the-art and is designed to address the concerns that were raised in the City of Boise case as well as the City of Grants Pass case, such that we regulate rather than prohibit. And so that's why the ordinance is before you. I will point out that the state of law is still in flux. The City of Grants Pass a couple weeks ago filed a petition for certiorari with the U.S. Supreme Court to address their ordinance. Their ordinance imposed administrative penalties in certain circumstances for homeless individuals, and that is what's being challenged, and that's what the Ninth Circuit said Grants Pass could not do. So it is an area of evolving state law and federal law. Where it lands, I can't tell you at this point, but my concern in bringing forth the ordinance was that it would provide the Sheriff's Department and city staff additional tools to address perceived issues with homelessness within the city that could not be addressed, in my view, constitutionally under our existing regulations. That's the reason for the ordinance.
Thank you very much. Council comments, questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
For Dave, too. So I know there's a lot of comments, and we've gotten some emails and calls. I have. Can you, for us, compare our current ordinance with the proposed changes and its new language, especially in the context of Boise, in terms of what is more enforceable for us?
Well, the current ordinance that we have is section 2-5, which says it's unlawful for any person to sleep or camp between the hours of 1.5 hours after sunset of one day and 6 a.m. of the next day, whether inside or outside of any vehicle, in or on any public road or public property or private property. That's precisely what Boise got in trouble for, is prohibiting sleeping outside. The longer version of it is if there are insufficient shelter beds in a community, then a city cannot enforce that type of ordinance. We do not have those types of shelter beds in Solvang, so I'm concerned that our current ordinance, if we were to try to enforce under that ordinance, would be the same result as the city of Boise. The new ordinance, as drafted, provides a number of tools for the city manager, city staff, the sheriff's department to direct people who are involuntarily homeless and who have no access to shelter beds an option. Basically, we're not criminalizing that condition, that existence. We are looking for ways to address it. The ordinance, I can't tell you every ordinance is perfect, but it's a lot better and a lot more defensible than the current ordinance that we have. Will we learn lessons as the case law develops? Should the Supreme Court accept the Grants Pass case? Of course, but ordinances are always subject to amendment. This ordinance was passed in 2002. 20 years before the Boise case and the Grants Pass came out. It is not state of the art. The ordinance before you on second reading, much better situation. It may not be what other people are looking for or everyone agrees with, but it is much more defensible in trying to address the issues of homelessness within the community, to provide options for both law enforcement and for city staff to regulate the time, place, and manner of where homeless individuals may need to camp if they're involuntarily homeless.
So is a follow-up question, because I'm trying to keep it a little simple, because I know there are perspectives that we should hear, that we are inviting more challenges in the changing of the ordinance. So the question is, in this effort to strengthen our municipal code and make it more current, does this provide more definition, say, for example, to the sheriff's office, who we just heard from today, more definition around what to enforce for our municipal code?
The short answer is absolutely. If we were to ask the sheriff's department to go and enforce under our existing ordinance, I suspect their response would be, we cannot engage in activity that we believe to be constitutionally inappropriate. And I think that is the response that we would get under our current ordinance.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Dave, as you know, there's 482 cities in California. Are we any different than any other city on this issue right now?
Any different in terms of what we're...
how we have to deal with it as what
No.
the state and what these courts dictate?
No.
So basically, we're in the same boat as Visalia, as Chula Vista, as wherever. We're all dealing with the exact same thing.
Yeah, we're bound by the federal constitutional law that comes out of the Ninth Circuit. And that if we were to end up in federal court arising out of a prosecution under our ordinance, we'd have the same case law to contend with as every other city in California. In fact, every other city in the Ninth Circuit.
You answered my question. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Dave, with this new ordinance, would you anticipate our community to have a greater homelessness as far as population, or could you say in any way?
Well, I can't give you an answer whether or not it would increase homelessness. That's due to factors entirely different than the ordinance itself. What I can say is that if there is a perceived problem with homeless encampments within the city that occur after the adoption of the new ordinance, I feel much more confident using the new ordinance than the old ordinance that's in place right now to take care of that issue.
So just a couple more questions. So as with all of the rulings and the precedents, we cannot make it flat out illegal to camp out because we do not have the resources, the shelters to direct houseless people to. Is that correct?
It's basically that we can't criminalize that. In other words, we can't put people in jail for the status of being homeless or for sleeping in public. The camping is an outgrowth of the City of Grants Pass case in that they were trying to regulate the issues that were raised in the Boise case, And the court said, well, no, you can't do that administratively, so that makes it even more difficult. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to thread the needle of the existing case law that is out there to address the concerns of homelessness within the community and provide both law enforcement and city staff the tools necessary to address that, which tools we don't have with our current ordinance.
So these are tools such as how long do they have to move out their encampment? How do we deal with their possessions? Where they can be, there are certain places that are absolutely out of the question. You cannot put an encampment meet here. It's much more specific, correct? While we cannot prohibit it, we can say, these are your options, and we have a way to enforce that, correct?
Right, and it's kind of, if you think of it as a sliding scale, if you prohibit homelessness everywhere in the community, 100% guarantee that it's unconstitutional. If you allow additional places where homeless people may set up for a short period of time, much less chance of your ordinance being challenged. Again, this is an area of law that is in continuous flux at the moment, but our current ordinance doesn't allow any options. It says no sleeping, no camping, period. If I had to take that into court, I would not give you a lot of opportunity at success before the courts. I feel much better about those opportunities with the proposed ordinance, although it may be perceived by some in the community to be inviting people into the community, that's not what it's intended to do. It's intended to provide the tools to remove encampments, to remove those types of situations under very strict timelines, whereas our current ordinance doesn't have any of that.
Okay, so this is a way to deal with encampments. It's not an invitation for everybody to camp out outside.
Not in the least. No, it's intended to provide the tools to staff and to the SO to stop those encampments from starting.
Thank you.
May I add to that, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
When you look at cities like Berkeley and Oakland and San Francisco and Venice and Santa Cruz, if you build it, they will come. And that's what I've been telling to people, is that we haven't built it. I don't think it's going to change anything because we don't have the services to proactively provide people to be a magnet to come to this town. So that's why I thought people were overreacting, because we don't have the services or even for Lompoc. They have a lot more services than we do for the homeless population that we don't have. So if I was homeless, I would not want to go to Solvang because I can't get a free lunch. But if I go to San Francisco, I can get fentanyl and a free lunch. So that's why I don't think that this is such a tremendous deal, because we don't have the services in the first place.
Mr. City Manager.
Yeah, I want to point out, in our negotiations with the Sheriff's Department regarding our new contract, which hopefully will be before you for consideration at the next council meeting, they made it very clear that they were not going to enforce the current, they didn't specifically say our current ordinance, but they made it clear that those types of things that were against their department policy, it would not be enforced. And I think Lieutenant Valencia probably, as staff, as our police chief of the city, could add some additional information about the current ordinance and the one that's on the agenda tonight. I might suggest you ask him a few questions as well.
Yeah, well, I think we got a few of them already. Thank you.
Okay.
So at this point in time, I would like to make a motion that we hold this ordinance for a couple of more sessions so we can talk about it some more and see what the state of the law is going to be. So I move that we do not approve this and we hold it in abeyance.
Well, Mr. Mayor, there are a number of members of the public who are present this evening, obviously. Before you make any motions, we typically would entertain public comment on that. But if the concern is that this ordinance needs additional working, or you don't wish to adopt it tonight, that's a policy decision you can certainly make. I would encourage you to take public comment in that light, that it may not be adopted. But to make things go a little bit more quickly, if it is the intention of the council to table this item, it may cause some people in the audience to shorten their comments or maybe not make comments at all. I'm just kind of laying out the ground map for you so that you can make some decisions about how you'd like to entertain the public comment.
Thank you very much. All right, council. Do we want to just hear comments for a while, or do you want to just pull it and say table it for now and then hear comments?
Well, Mr. City Attorney, didn't you just basically contradict that we should open it up first? But at least the audience, the residents know kind of where the council's leaning on this.
Well, I've certainly heard the way the mayor's leaning on this, that it may be tabled. I don't want to assume the other four because
Correct.
I'm not looking for the nodding on that. But
Yeah,
the Brown Act does require the city council to take public comment at or before the time action is taken on a particular item. If the action is to table the item, council certainly can do that. And if you're telegraphing, Mr. Mayor, to the public that your intention is to table this, that certainly will dictate how some people may approach this, but you do have an obligation to entertain public comment, even if you do make that direction.
Yeah, I expected to make public comment afterwards, but that's a fair point. Let's go to public comment on this particular issue now, and then we'll bring it back to discuss whether we table it or not. My first comment is Joanne Clark.
I was very happy to hear what Elizabeth Arona said about the possibility of a solution. First, I need to apologize to the council for not being informed about the issues that we're presently addressing. I should have been paying attention, and I'm referring, of course, to the ordinance which addresses the homeless issue. Now that it has been brought to my attention, as well as many others, I have a request, and it sounds like you're heading that way. I need to preface this request by saying I'm sure you're trying to come up with the best solution to this very concerning and sensitive issue. I'm asking you to wait and take some more time to make a final decision. We as citizens need more information about what you have planned, more time to study these decisions, more time to study if these decisions are the most informed and very best resolution in order to follow the laws you are required to follow and to keep our residents, especially our children and seniors, and our businesses safe. I recognize the challenges that come with the homeless in our community. We also want to do what we can do safely for them too. Please do not rush into passing anything before we have a chance to really search out and see what our options are for the very best resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And although Ms. Clark stayed within the time limit, I'm going to enforce very strictly a 3-minute time limit on all conversations. And if I smack the hammer, they'll cut off the microphone over there. So please watch the lights in front of you. Renee Condit.
Hello again, Renee Condit. Well, camping can be a very enjoyable time for some. For others, it's a way of life. And that being said, I applaud you for getting ahead of a possible lack of communication that could arise with our visitors by coming up with a solution to an uncomfortable position that we would be putting our law enforcement officers in. I have a few questions that I couldn't find the answers to. I read all that I could get hold of that you posted. One, I want to know where are the designated areas located in the city. Two, would there be any dry camping, quote, air quotes on, allowed, meaning that there's no running water there or restrooms on the site, that the campers would somehow be providing all that themselves, like on a lot somewhere? And are any of these sites located near a playground? So I'm real interested in where you're thinking of putting these. So thank you very much. I appreciate you guys. This is something we all have to deal with, and I appreciate open communication on it because we're all involved in it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Jesse Bengood.
So close.
What did I do wrong?
You're fine. You're fine. Everybody does it.
So thank you very much. I'm Jessie Bengoa, and
That's an A. Well, I can't
that's
read
an
your
A.
writing.
My writing, sorry. Again, I'm a longtime resident. That was my mom. It's been our property that she was referencing that we've had quite a bit of issues with homelessness lately and violent homelessness. And so, again, I want to reiterate, really, truly thank you for what you're doing because it is something we're all in together. One thing that I wanted to ask, and I think I'll take what she said and take it a step further, is any ordinance that is passed, I would ask that either as a part of the ordinance or as an addendum to the ordinance, that the city provides the exact locations that the camping would be allowed or that homeless would be allowed to quote unquote camp. I think the residents of this town deserve the opportunity to know the precise locations and be able to comment on those locations before those locations are passed as part of this ordinance or decided upon unilaterally by the city manager. The residents should be a part of that. So that would be one request. The second request, and I read the ordinance, would be, my question is after the 72 hours, if the homeless choose not to leave, it looks as though, and correct me if I'm wrong, their possessions can be removed and stored somewhere. I'd be curious as the exact location of that and who's paying for it. If it's existing location or if that really is going to fall on taxpayers, I'd be curious. So again, thank you very much. I urge you to take as strong a stance as possible on this to protect our community. And thank you for keeping our town safe.
Thank you very much. John Peterson?
Good evening, John Peterson, a resident here in Solvang. And I too appreciate your efforts here in addressing this. You're playing the tightrope on this thing, I understand that. After reading the proposed changes to the camping ordinance particularly, a couple of things came up, a little more nuts and bolts of the whole thing. The revised ordinance specifies a 200-foot buffer around the school, and as I read it, for parked vehicles used for human habitation. I missed seeing where in the proposed ordinance it spoke to camping within that 200-foot buffer. Perhaps city attorney could address that as to whether that was a deliberate exclusion or an oversight. However, what happens in the tents versus what happens in the RVs can be equally detrimental to the children, and the children are who we are trying to protect by the nature of that buffer. I personally feel that buffer should be greater than 200 feet. 200 feet is 2 or 3 residential lots. There was a time I could throw a rock further than that, and we certainly hear what's going on and see what's going on. And I think we've all seen homeless encampments that we did not want our children exposed to. I also wonder that if we have a 200-foot excluded buffer area at the school, or something greater, hopefully, why do we not have, and Mr. Mayor, I'm looking for the light. This is my first time speaking to you. Right in front of me. Okay. I'm colorblind. I'm sorry. Why don't we have that same buffer established in the residential districts? The children are going to go for a limited amount of time to school. They're going to go home. They're going to spend the evenings, the weekends, the holidays. They're at their homes. Is it not the same exposure, the same danger to them of whatever may happen? So I would say that a buffer zone around the residential districts is equally important for the children, for the families, as you might find around these school zones. So I leave you with 2 things. One, expanding the buffer zone. I'd suggest a square block or a block away. It may not be feasible. And the buffer around the homes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Linda Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. You've addressed a lot tonight already, most of my notes, actually. So what I want to say is, sure. Councilmember Clark, if you build it, they will come. Who wouldn't want to come to Solvang. We love it here, right? My grandmother was a Christensen. She was from Denmark, and she loved Solvang, and so do I. And I want you to protect it, please. I ask that. So with everything that's said tonight, I want to try to bring some solutions rather than just say other things, that don't matter. So I think at this point we need to find some solutions that work. What about safe parking? What about safe parking at Nahoe Park or Santa Rosa Park or churches or the Vets Hall? What about grants? Are there grants available? I don't know. These are all things that staff and you and us as a community maybe can figure out together to try to make this work for the businesses, for the residents, for the tourists, so that we preserve Solvang. And that really is what we all want tonight. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Sarah Coate, I believe it is.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Cote, and I'm a resident of Solvang. You've very well explained a lot of the things, how this came to be, and we do have some unhoused people that are in need of services and just a place to stay in a safe community. So I do hope that we can find some solutions for them within our community that don't involve camping on the actual street. But really, this is a very well-drafted ordinance. I think you guys have put a lot of thought into it. My primary concerns are actually related to enforcement. Do we have the staff? Does it go to the sheriff's department? Who do we call as concerned residents? Hey, these people have been in my neighborhood. And how is that going to be? Is it going to be a code enforcement thing where we need to wait for Tuesday or Monday to arrive after a long weekend? And they've been there since Friday night. So, is it going to be sheriff's department? Is it going to be the actual city staff? And also, will there be outreach to the community? Because I live near an area that would be great for camping, and it's actually private property. So things like the Rancho San Ynez Mobile Estates has that lovely green patch. Well, that's private property, so they might want to be informed that they should be signing their property, private property, no camping, and so that the sheriff's department knows that they can come in and evict them from the property immediately. They don't need to wait 24 hours or whatever. So, and also the LSL, the river course, and all of that private property, is something that they should be very well aware of. Or do we need to be putting signs up on our own property? Hey, this is private property. If you have extensive lots, to avoid encroachment on your own personal property. But I do think it's well drafted, and I appreciate your efforts in trying to provide solutions for our unhoused population. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Terry Harmon.
Okay. I've had some experience with the homeless encampments before with my projects in Africa and in India, so I don't want anybody to think for 1 minute I'm not a NIMBY person. I'm advocating tonight for both the homeless as well as Solvang in our community. But as far as these rules are concerned, you have to understand these people don't follow rules. Okay, a lot of these people have problems. So, and if we have just discovered tonight that we have crime going up and less people to help enforce it, what makes anybody think that that these rules are gonna be enforced either way? We need to think about it that way. Now, I'm really concerned about the fact that most homeless encampments have fires. It gets cold up here at night. We have a tinderbox out there. And so one of my suggestions is work with the fire department, have some sort of special something where they can be patrolling that area to make sure we don't burn the entire Sunny Nez Valley down. I mean, that could happen very easily. With these people, you could have your bathrooms here, the public bathrooms destroyed. That's not good. It freezes here during the winter time, so the ill-prepared homeless could die. This is not good. But if you invite them, yes, they will come. They will be panhandling for food, breaking into cars for shelter, or worse, breaking into your home or somebody's home for food or whatever it is that they need. Crime is up, staff is down. I don't know how you enforce any of this, but I do know that Solvang Stellar's reputation as a family-friendly community and destination could get trashed, as well as the people that need the help are not going to get it. Now, you were mentioning something earlier, Elizabeth, which was exactly what I was going to recommend, is that you get an intergovernmental exchange, collaboration between Santa Barbara, Lompoc, and Santa Maria, where these services are. I don't know how it's going to work, but it can help give us a spot where we can take these people where they need to be, where they're safe, and they can get the help that they want. The people that don't want the help are the ones you should be worried about. Those are the ones that don't follow the rules, and I do think we need to get a little stricter with our enforcement, and if we don't have the money for that, you know, this is like a never-ending trail of mess, so you need to get more help. As a group, you need to decide about increasing the budget for protection for the community. Don't pass this ordinance yet. Take some time, maybe get an advisory group of people together that could help give you some input on that. But don't just willy-nilly approve this thing and think that it's going to fix everything. It won't. It will probably make it worse. Talk to the people of Lompoc. They did the very same thing, and they've been complaining profusely about the influx of the homeless to them and all the problems that they have. Talk with them.
Thank you very much. Suzette Cormos? Very good. I've got, I'm sorry? All right, go right ahead then, please. Introduce yourself.
Alex Cormos, resident of Solvang. Okay. I've been looking over some of the material from your last August 28th meeting and just have some questions. It seems like there's no distinction on the definition of public areas, that all in one, that the city intends to maintain public health and safety by ensuring that the public areas remain readily accessible for their intended purpose, but at the same time saying also available for shelter and sleeping by people who have no other means. Options for shelter. I mean, that seems somewhat suicidal for a community that depends on visitors and tourism, that you can have people sleeping in doorways in front of shops like we have in San Francisco and Los Angeles and other big cities. I wonder if there's another option possibly that might make more sense. Can we define public areas a little bit more distinctly to maybe keep people out of the tourism areas so that we don't lose business and tax revenue that we depend upon? I'm also concerned about the statements in here about the city manager being able to allow camping on private property, and I wonder how that's possible. That anyone in the city can say that somebody can come and camp on my property under any circumstances. So maybe can we have a little bit more clarification on that? And then I also wonder if there are other solutions possibly. I heard maybe busing the people up to Santa Maria or somewhere where there are services. That makes a lot of sense to me. Putting people in a bus and busing them up to Sacramento even makes more sense to me, but I don't know if we can do that legally or not. But certainly there needs to be more discussion on this, and I know you guys have all the best intentions, and I know the legal matters are very difficult, and but we got to do what's right for the city because you know, our city depends upon this tourism for our revenue. It's not like every other city, and we have plenty of examples of cities that are are in the doldrums because of this problem. And so I don't know if that's going to help us in a legal court of law or not, but we certainly have lots of examples of places that have suffered from this kind of policy. And Robert, to your point that we don't have the services here, what's going to stop those services from coming here is the question, right? So is there a more common sense, maybe putting in a little bit of homeless shelter somewhere in the city that everybody can live with? Maybe that's a better solution.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
At the top, yes.
Harlan Munke, if I got that right? Munke.
The Dutch name in a Danish town. My name is Harlan Munke, and I appreciate all your efforts. You have all put in a lot of efforts, and this is something new that I didn't really know much about, even though I'm aware of what's going on in the valley. And we own a couple of stores here in town, and we're very concerned. We're hearing from our employees. At times they're scared. They're scared to go to their cars. And there's a lot of these small things that are happening in our community. Today I was talking with the manager of Paula's Pancakes, who's right next door to us. And she had some issues of something happened 2 days ago. And so I think there's so many things that are going on that maybe most people don't even hear about. And they're so very important to deal with. And as we all know, that tourism is such an important factor in our community, so we have to keep that first and foremost. And I appreciate every one of your efforts. You guys, I'm really impressed with all the efforts. And I think taking a little time, not much, but a little time to work into this. But I just thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Arthur George?
I'm Arthur George from the Board of Directors of the Village Collection Homeowners Association, which has asked me to speak on its behalf. Between the Village Collection and the Mission lies Lot 72, which is city property. The city has leased this land to the Santa Barbara Trust for Historic Preservation so that the trust can create and manage the lot as part of a state historic park, which includes the protected archaeological ruins of the former Chumash village on the lot. The lease prohibits overnight camping there. It also lists the uses to which the city can still make of the land, and these do not include allowing overnight camping there. The lot is a publicly accessible open space where people can walk, run, walk their dogs, fly kites, etc. So the issue that you face is whether the city is willing to violate the lease with the trust or continue not allowing camping on Lot 72. The Village Collection opposes camping on Lot 72, and not only because it would violate the lease. Doing so would allow campers at a protected archaeological site and be contrary to its already earmarked use as a state historical park. Has the city checked how this ordinance would interact with the laws and regulations governing state historic parks and protected archaeological sites? Have the Chumash been consulted? Or what about the California Department of Parks and Recreation, which presumably would not allow camping in this historic park? Further, from the Village Collection's own perspective, having a steady stream of campers adjacent to us would create a public nuisance and lower our property values. Whenever the city holds a public event on Lot 72, attendees inevitably trespass across our private common area, which borders Lot 72. This not only creates liability issues for us, but these people litter, relieve themselves there, and the noise is a public nuisance. Allowing camping there would make this a constant and worse problem. So what to do? In the draft ordinance, Lot 72 is lumped in with other city property where camping would now be allowed. But Section 563B2 of the draft sets forth certain exceptions where camping still would not be allowed, such as in the tourist commercial district where public utilities are located, etc. Lot 72 should be added to these exceptions in order to make it clear that camping is prohibited there. In doing this, the city shouldn't just rely on the land lease's prohibition. The other legal grounds that I mentioned before would have to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michelle Boyle.
Good evening, Council. Michelle Boyle, Solvang resident. I'm very alarmed at this homeless issue. I don't believe it's really camping. I believe most people pay for camping. And I really would like to address the issue of what is really going to help people who need a place to stay or who are drug addicted or for whatever reason. And I think that the current system right now where people are going homeless and camping out places and then moving along, they're not being helped. So I think you have a blank slate right now where you can create a situation, an environment for them. And I would ask you to please consider that. Possibly, instead of, I would suggest that you find some city-owned property so that it could be contained and people could come for whatever amount of time that you designate, a short period of time, so that people are not in our residential areas. It's much harder to control. That way, they could be helped to a limited amount for a certain amount of time. And I think that that could be a lot more humane. And then whatever limited services that could be provided, that those could be done as well. I really like the idea of SB CAG help. And I'm wondering also if there could be grants from foundations that could be applied so that you could manage this much easier. And maybe the crime could be helped as well, better in that situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mary Johnson? Did I get that right? Marjorie. My apologies.
My name is Marjorie Johnson, and I'm a lifelong...
Pull that microphone.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Rich.
My name is Marjorie Johnson, and I'm a lifelong resident of the Valley. On one side of my family, they came here in the late 1800s. On the other side, in 1917. And I think this ordinance is wrong. We have seen the results of this situation, and it's been a failure. I think our government has failed us in this. And the reason we have this problem is because of the ridiculous laws that have been passed. I would like to say, I do like your refusing or going back, and I think that's something that we as citizens need to do, is to let them know you can pass these stupid things, but we are not going to, as citizens, tolerate and live under this. I also would like to defend the Sheriff's Department, who have an impossible situation since we keep passing laws that favor the criminals, and their hands are so hamstrung, and we need bigger budgets. Recently, our dear governor had to call in the National Guard to San Francisco, and I thought, well, you know, maybe you might have thought that getting rid of a lot of the police is this reason that you have this, and that your situation, which of course is a lot for him since he was the mayor for about 8 years, helping to create this. But I think if we give in to anything at all you have to do is camp, and camping is kind of it's squatting, and we could use the correct word for what it would be. But along with that, we do need to help them. And it's the policies and the laws and such that have created the situation. And I think the federal government should be responsible. We need to offer them help for the mentally ill. A lot of them are Vietnam vets that suffer from drug abuse and such. There's just so many things that way that are not the fault. And small towns cannot solve the problem. And even the big ones can't either, as we know from what has happened. And I think that we have to help them, but we're not helping them by just letting them squat out here for 72 hours. All we're doing is inviting more crime. I live down at the Rancho Mobile Estates they're talking about, and I know about the Greenbelt. We have already had one of the homeless in there. I personally had someone come to the door to ask if they could use my shower and if they could wash their clothes.
Thank you very much. Your time is up. Thank you, ma'am.
Marjorie for governor.
Sheridan Forey. So, I don't think she'll. Sheridan Forey? Governor Marjorie said it all. All right. Linda Johansson.
Margie, I vote for you. Thank you, Council, so much for your service. I want to thank the law enforcement for their service. I represent several generations of family here, and this is a real problem we have going on. I live on Fjord Drive. My front yard is the river. I grew up playing in the river. My folks grew up playing in the river. My children grew up playing in the river. My grandson, who's going to be born in November, will be playing in that river. I'm afraid to be in the river now. I'm afraid to be on the Greenbelt. We called the police 4 times in a month and a half because of a gentleman down there in our area. We have all kinds of families that have paid exorbitant prices for their homes down there. I'm afraid for their children to be out there because I don't know if the homeless person is going to come and grab them and take them into the bushes. I'm afraid for Margie, and I'm afraid for the people at the mobile park to walk down there for fear they're going to be pulled in the bushes as well. I think a homeless man was in my garage. My dog was barking incessantly. I opened the garage door and I saw movement. I was absolutely terrified. I closed my door and locked my door. I'm terrified down there that this should not be the case. We live in a beautiful area. We should feel safe here. We do not want to be like Santa Barbara and San Francisco and lose our businesses uptown and have this home be that our community just stop. Santa Barbara has stopped. San Francisco is vacant in their stores. I don't want that for this community. We own a business here. I want us to thrive and to feel safe and to have our tourism be able to feel safe when they join us here. That is not the case. I was in Nicaragua until late last night. The entire time I was there, I was getting emails from friends and neighbors about the homelessness. So please, please do your research. Make sure that you're making good decisions because it affects all of us who live here in this very expensive paradise, and we want it to remain safe. So please do your due diligence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. C.J. Jackson.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, this is my 5th meeting coming before this body to talk about the homeless issue. The homeless are here. They're not in the school parking lot, Mr. Clark. They are down on our property. They are down under the bridge, and that has been going on, and I have been talking to everyone for the last 3 years. Finally, I make the mistake of reading the Indy and Newshawk, so I know that the state of California has provided somewhere between $3 and $6 million as a component methodology that Councilwoman Arona is talking about. But for communities to participate in that, they have to have the tools available to them to facilitate the program. Now, during the rainstorm, many of one large encampment on our property, their belongings took the express train to Surf Beach, and they came back. And they were visited by Good Samaritan, and they were offered opportunities, and they took them. But there was not a long-term viable opportunity. What I can report to you, just from reading the newspapers, that's what's happening in Lompoc right now at the Good Samaritan facility. So when Councilwoman Orona talks about what's happening, that is happening. So I am encouraging you, having come before you, having come before the 3rd District, having come before the county on this issue, give yourself the tools so that when you have the opportunity for law enforcement to enforce, they can do so because there is a place to go. I support the ordinance. It's not perfect. It could be enhanced in some way in terms of identifying areas, but I'm already dealing with it. And I have had some of the best that our Sheriff's Department has to offer in their employees coming down there to deal with it and do what they can. For some reason, being concealed is more attractive to the homeless community that I've experienced than wanting to go up and be in the village collection. That doesn't mean you're not going to have them, but what it means is give yourself the tools that I have been begging you to get and will continue to beg you to get and will continue to lobby for. And we finally also have a really great sheriff's lieutenant, so he knows and he gets it. So please give him the tools so that his great people can do the job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jim Nell? I got that right? Cannell. My apologies.
Good evening. Well, I guess I'm right near the end of this thing. So I own the Lansby Inn and the San Ynez Inn, and we've done several projects in the San Ynez and Solvang for the last 7 to 10 years. And we came to this area because of what's happened in Santa Barbara. I'm the largest property owner in downtown Santa Barbara. I've already experienced what you guys are opening the door to experience, and that's the influx of an undesirable element that erodes your city core. And that's what's happened to downtown Santa Barbara. They used to call Santa Barbara the jewel of the coast. They don't call that anymore. Do you realize that Santa Barbara has a 40% vacancy factor in their retail spaces? It's the highest vacancy factor in the state of California for coastal cities. We've gone from the jewel of the coast to the pit of the ocean. And that's where we've gone. Solvang is not that far away. You are inviting an element that's going to erode your city core. And retailers don't kick and scream. They don't want to be heard. Do you know how they speak? With their feet. They leave. And that's what we saw in Santa Barbara. Retailers had enough of the homeless, enough of the defecation, enough of the public being afraid to come downtown because they didn't feel safe. That's what you're inviting. I'm all for what Mr. Jackson said, but I'm also for strong laws and strong enforcement and the power of the police to do what they're supposed to do, and that's to protect the public. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Andrew Sorensen?
Good evening. My name is Andrew Sorensen. Couple things. I looked at the draft and specifically the provisions of 5-6-5 on enforcement. My concern is to have somebody who is not an elected official and I think is new to the neighborhood, to the area. I think the council is giving away too much authority to a city manager. I think that there is a lot of room here for discretion that I think belongs in front of the city council, not in the hands of an individual. I mean nothing, any offense towards you, sir, at all. I just talk about just generally, I think the city council should be making these modifications, interpretations. Otherwise, I think there's too much power in one individual's hands over something that's so dramatically, potentially, affecting this community. On a personal level, I live near the park, the Hans Christian Andersen Park, and I know a number of children walk through there to get to school. And I'm hoping that the park is not going to be part of this, But if it is part of it, then I think we have to be mindful of the fact that there is indeed opportunity for something very bad to happen. I have a background where I used to be a public defender back in the day. I was on one of the more recent grand juries in Santa Barbara County. And so the homeless problem is a real problem. I'm just hoping this doesn't become a political issue here. It's not political. It's a problem that affects all of us, and it's not an easy one. It's a very difficult problem, and I know that. But my hope is that, at least on this particular ordinance, that there is a real view of how do we as a community work together and not at cross purposes. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I have no more speaker slips at this time. I guess we just had another one. Yes, sir. If you would step to the, introduce yourself and.
Good evening. My name is Rich Condit. I'm a lifelong resident of Solvang, own businesses here and live here. And I did have the pleasure of going through the ordinance earlier today, kind of after learning about, well, we missed the first reading, apparently, didn't really know what was going on, and then all of a sudden, I'm sure you'll attest that you now know there's a lot of emotion involved in this. And unfortunately, unlike the previous speaker, I do think it's a political issue because homelessness is a very good political topic for a lot of people. I think if you build it, they will come. And I think reading the ordinance, it seems very splintered. It's very difficult to me reading it. I don't understand how the Sheriff's Department's going to enforce this ordinance as it's written. Hopefully it won't be written like that and accepted. But as far as leapfrogging, camping around the town in different areas and giving him notice and then having him move to another location and then another location, there's nothing in the ordinance that says where these areas the city's planning on, where in the city they're planning on putting the homeless people that are going to be pushed that direction. And I think that's an important thing for everyone to understand. It could be in your backyard. Well, you guys are on the council. It won't be in your backyard. I understand that. But anyway, I think it's important to define that and let people know exactly what's going on. And I think the way the ordinance is written, it needs to be cleaned up. And yes, the current ordinance is a good ordinance, I think, because it's so simple and it's not complicated. So if you could do an iteration of something like that, it would be beneficial for everybody in the town instead of going. Well, a good question is, what are our friends to the west of us doing in Buellton? Have they done the exact same thing? Has anyone asked Buellton what they're doing about their homeless ordinance or how they're working with this? Because they have a big issue out there. And does it duplicate our ordinance that you guys are proposing now? That'd be another good question I'd like answered. Anyway, I appreciate your hard work, but I think that the items that are in the new ordinance need to be clarified and cleaned up substantially, and it needs to be made workable so the police department can enforce it. Homeless people don't really, for the most part, care about our rules, like you and I and everybody else. We don't like to violate rules. Homeless people really don't care. They'll do whatever they want to do, and it's like CJ said, they like to camp out in private spots. Well, that's your answer to the question right there. They're going to be here no matter what. So please clean it up and help us all, and don't invite more homeless here by an ordinance that you're promoting. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Is there anybody else in the room that would like to speak on this matter? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Sabine Overson. My concern is what everyone else is concerned about, and then I have another major one that really kind of scares me, and that is the fire. Like in the winter, they might make a little fire. I live by the park, H.C. Andersen, Hans Christian Andersen Park, and I'm very concerned because I don't want to be away. I don't want to be sleeping at night, and they light a fire, and the whole town, the whole park, everything's going to be up in flames. especially what happened in Lahaina. And then when you go and we have, depending on the wind, we get very high winds. Like the other day, we had a lot of heat and we had a lot of wind. Things like that could really, I'm very, very concerned. So please consider that, especially when you do it with parks or whatever with the homeless. And we sit outside. I don't think it's the right view. I do feel for those homeless people. I really do. They need help. And this is not the way we help people by just letting them sleep on the ground. They need a place to be. They need to have a place where they can go home at night and have shelter. That should not be in Solvang. That should be, because I do work with people that got themselves in trouble. They're human beings and they need help and they need guidance. And there's places to get that. We sit outside in the morning and I see bags in the park with homeless stuff, and we have called the cops several times, so the sheriff, to go over there. 3 times have been so kind to come over there and talk to them or remove them. And as we hear, there's only certain things they can do. And their belonging is still there. I don't know if they come back and forth. I don't know. I know they have several bags over there. It's very upsetting, and something needs to be done. So please, about the fire, if there's anything that you can put in while we can't have them, at least the fire or the parks, where as soon as we have a little fire, everything is up in flames. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Do we have anybody on Zoom that wanted to speak? I don't see any hands up. Do you? All right, let's bring it back to the council. Okay. At this point in time, I've taken a lot of notes from what everybody's been saying, and I've got some comments that I will bring to us later. But at this point in time, I'd like to pull this item and hold it and get staff to review it again before we do a final vote on it. So that would be my motion.
I'll second. I would add comment, though. First of all, appreciate the public speaking tonight. My experience, and it's not lost on me in particular who we work for. And my experience is our Solvang community is really smart. And for the most part, your comments are quite constructive. So thank you for that. I would like to pull it because I think that there's some work to be done on making sure that tools that we could use are truly operational ready and can be implemented by the staff and implemented by the Sheriff's Department. So there's one more thing that I think you said, Dave, and I do want to underscore it slightly, which is there is an opportunity that law becomes more clear in the next Supreme Court session. Is that correct?
It's uncertain at this point whether the Supreme Court will take the grants pass case. If they do, we're probably looking at 18 months to 2 years before the decision comes from the Supreme Court. If they do not accept that petition, then the grants pass ruling stands, which complicates our mission dramatically because it prohibits enforcement of even administrative citations in this realm. We can certainly look at that, but I will know more probably in the next 30 to 60 days as to what's going to happen with that petition.
Did it be worth it to understand where we stand in 30 days' time?
Yeah, I will. I don't know if the council's interested in me answering some of the questions while the people are here tonight. I was taking some notes, but there were some questions, Mr. Mayor, that I might be able to answer for the people.
Well, there were several that could be answered by us. Do you want to proceed with that? That's fine.
Well, I'll take direction from the council. It sounds like the council wishes to pull this and do some more work, but there are some issues that are addressed that I can probably address in the existing ordinance.
Since these people care that much, if you would, I would appreciate it. And so would they, I'm sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there was a question from, I believe, Mr. Peterson about why there's not a 200-foot rule for camping other than in vehicles. It is incorporated in Section 563B7 that says camping would be prohibited at any time within those areas as defined in Section 7.3. So it's just a cross-reference to the other one, so it's there. Ms. Cote asked who will enforce. It'll be enforced by city staff and the Sheriff's Department. Ms. Harmon and Ms. Olson had concerns about fire. There's a provision that prohibits open flames, recreational fires, burning of garbage, bonfires, or other fires, including combustible fuel-based flames. Mr. Kormos was concerned about the city manager allowing camping on private property. That is nowhere in the ordinance, and it's not true. Mr. George was concerned about the city violating the lease on Lot 72. The city has to respect the provisions of the lease that are in the lease. That's not something that we've got control over. That is something that Lot 72 has a lease with the Historic Trust, and the Historic Trust would be the one that would be enforcing anything regarding camping under their lease with the city. Those were the major issues that I took up. More globally about the issue of if you build it, they will come. I'll just say kind of bluntly that if someone wants to set up a homeless encampment in the park on Mission Drive right now, we don't have the tools to move that away. I'll say it again. We do not have those tools right now. Our ordinance does not stand the test of the Constitution, in my view. And if we were to use our existing ordinance, we would likely have a civil rights violation against the city. We have other tools that if there's other criminal activity taking place in that regard, we would be able to enforce in that regard. But the Sheriff's Department will not enforce our current ordinance as it's written.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Could you clarify one more thing, which seemed to be a theme or a question? This ordinance is specifically addressing public space in the city of Solvang. There is no designated camping area. Can you please clarify?
Yeah, that's correct. There is no designated camping area. What it does is it sets up parameters that if someone does set up a camp on public property, we have a way to remove that camp. It is not an authorization or an invitation for people to come and camp. It is specifically a set of tools to remove those camps if they show up on public property. And I think that's the differentiation that's being lost tonight.
Oh, no.
Sheriff's Department will deal with it.
Is that an arrestable offense, or is that something you can even enforce?
That's a great question. I don't think it's an arrestable offense.
So is the council interested in doing a back and forth with members of the public on this? Because
We'll
I
do this
can.
one thing on the
Yeah,
fire, if
okay.
you would.
So if there are ordinances other than the camping ordinance that deal with fire, those can be enforced. If there aren't any and we don't have a prohibition on open flames, then people can have campfires. The ordinance that we drafted does have a prohibition on open flames, and we would be able to enforce against open flames. But the current camping ordinance does not have that prohibition.
Thank you very much. All right. At this point in time, we've got a motion on the table
And a second.
and a second to pull this and have staff do a little bit more work on it and bring it back to the council for approval. Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Claudia Arona.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elizabeth Arona.
Yes.
Mayor Infante.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go on to section C, 6A. If you would introduce that, please, Ms. City Attorney.
It's not you, just so you know.
Is there a sale somewhere?
Somebody yelled free beer and they're all
They're giving
going.
something away.
Let's give it a moment.
Raphael left already, so that's why they're leaving.
Let him clear out.
Man, first day on the job. I really like all the hard work we're doing, but
Yeah.
Okay, if you would introduce that, please. There's only a couple of us that are paying attention at this point, so go ahead.
I have a question.
No. Sorry. Thank you. Go ahead.
Item 6A, approve Amendment 3 to the agreement with Carrillo Engineers, Inc. for an expanded scope of services for completion of a time schedule compliance plan for Regional Water Quality Control Board to support USDA grant application for the WWTP Water Quality Project for the additional amount of $106,270 for a total contract amount not to exceed $308,760 for the existing term to April 1, 2024, and authorize the mayor to execute on behalf of the city.
I heard her.
Staff
Thank you.
report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank Jeff for his patience in waiting to do a presentation. As you may recall, this came before council 2 weeks ago. There were some questions from the council about the some of the guarantees we might have. There's obviously kind of a moving target here. It's the third amendment now for this particular contract, and it was a request to have somebody from Corello be here. So Jeff has graciously is attending via Zoom. He has a brief presentation to kind of explain why we are where we are at the moment and answer any council questions. So take it away, Jeff.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Just want to make sure before we get started. Okay. So happy to be here. Sounds like you guys got a lot of important stuff going on in the city. Are you seeing my presentation slide here?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Let's see. Please let me know if you start to see. Oh, you're seeing my face, aren't you?
Do we need to allow him to share?
He's probably got two monitors.
He should be allowed to share.
Okay. You got a share button there somewhere?
Are you having trouble with the share screen feature?
Are you seeing my face or are you seeing my presentation?
Just your face.
Okay, let me see.
Kind of scary looking, actually, but.
Sorry about that. I need to unshare. It's not letting me unshare.
And everything on the toolbar on the bottom?
Allow participants to start video. Are we sharing something? Are we sharing something? We're not sharing, no. He's, we're unpinned, and it should allow him. It's not, let's see if I can turn that off for a second.
Okay, now your face is gone.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm trying to share the right video, and it's not letting me. It's also not letting me unshare.
Would you mind trying logging out and logging back in?
Sure. I apologize for this. I'll be right back. Might be on my end, but
It's up to you. You guys want to take a couple-minute break? And we'll see if we can get this back online?
That works. Yes, she is. Here comes Jeff coming back. Weishar, I believe, yeah.
Everybody should be able to share. I've talked about this issue before.
This is the direction we're heading. I just figured if you want notes, so it's just notes, so it's not. I was just in case they needed to have any questions about it. I know where we're going.
How you doing? Doing all right. Good to know.
So he's sharing.
He's out there. Good.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I came from Goliad. And currently, sorry, the river. And then I go through the handsaw. So I'm dealing with this. I'm having all these troubles. This is easy. 500 in lump. So.
I know, but there's something I didn't know about.
No, they call it, but we're handling it, but it's aggressive. It's aggressive.
Hi, folks. Is this working for you now?
Jeff, we got you.
We can see it.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for the difficulties there. Hopefully I have my video now too. So, okay, so sorry for the inconvenience there. I know you all are having a long night. So this is just a couple of slides to talk to you about where we're at. We kind of have two parallel issues that we're dealing with, right? We've been working on the wastewater treatment plant upgrades, and with that is the grant and low interest loan application we've been working towards with the USDA. Parallel to that, we've been dealing with the Regional Water Quality Control Board, who's brought down some new water quality limits for the treatment plant itself and the effluent, and we've had some discussions on that. Some of them not easy discussions, but we're actually making some good progress in that regard. So I understand there's some concern on these different amendments and whatnot, and so just to walk you through the two issues and let you know where we're at and what we're working towards today. You all know, in terms of what we're trying to do at the wastewater treatment plant, is bring it up to date in terms of replacing some very old assets, some aging assets that just are getting hard to maintain for staff, and meeting some new water quality limits in terms of nitrogen limits, and moving towards some recycled water, as well as upgrading some outdated electrical systems, getting a new administration and laboratory for the facility, and some dewatering. So that's what we've been working on through the Phase 2 project. The advancement of that was kind of put on hold because of the price tag, and we wanted to move into working towards some grant and low interest loan application. So with that application, we had to do the preliminary engineering report, which we have submitted. One of the addendums or amendments to our contract included having to do a flood plain study to show that the treatment plant is out of the floodplain, which we have successfully shown to them. And on top of that, we've submitted the environmental report, and we've also submitted the interim funding documentation that shows that the city can initially fund the project before the loan and grant kick in and you start getting reimbursements from USDA. So where we're at now on the project and the grant and loan application is working to finalize the reports that we've submitted, having to submit those for public comment. And more recently, what has come up is showing a path to compliance. And the compliance issue is something that was brought up recently by the Water Quality Control Board and their implementation of some new limits through the Central Valley, which Solvang has been subjected to. And what the USDA says is basically they became aware of these issues that came up back in April, May, and until we can show them that we're moving to compliance, they're not going to supply the grant and loan. But as soon as we can show them that we're moving toward compliance, we can get back on the path to securing the grant and the low interest loan. So the question is, what is the compliance issue that came up? Well, the Regional Water Quality Control Board adopted a new general permit for the Central Valley that they've been pushing towards multiple entities, including Solvang. Buellton went through it as well, and we're dealing with it. We're actually working with Santa Maria and Santa Barbara on this issue as well. The regional board came forward in April with an email to the city saying, hey, this is going to move forward. You have to show us how you're going to meet this. You have to basically submit to us your plan on how you're going to meet these new limits. And oh, by the way, I know it's April, but you have to give this to us in June and show us your plan. So we're the city and we were immediately put on task to develop this plan very quickly. And so we were asked to immediately start working on that, which we did, and we met the deadline in June that the regional board put on us. And after submitting that, we've had some additional meetings with the regional board that have actually resulted in some good discussion and what we think is a path forward that can limit the financial impact to the city in a good way. I know we've had some discussions in the past talking about what those initial limits could mean to the city, and they really revolved around the total dissolved solids, the chloride, and the sodium, which is a result of the hardness of the city water and the amount or the number of in-home water softeners that are adding a lot of salt into the water that folks are sending from their home to the wastewater treatment plant. What we found out in working with the regional, the Water Quality Control Board is, what I'm showing you here or on this table is what some of these water quality objectives that are coming out of the wastewater treatment plant. And on the right, you see what they call the Santa Ynez groundwater basin. So these limits are all based on water quality objectives to improve the groundwater quality. And the regional board has been pushing Solvang towards the Santa Ynez water quality objectives, which are seen here, and which were the original basis for some of our discussions on having to go to some sort of membrane, some sort of expensive treatment that could also result in a waste stream that would have to be dealt with. The more we dived into this with the regional board, we found out that actually we're not subjected to just this water quality basin for Santa Ynez, but that we could actually fall into either the neighboring Santa Rita water quality subbasin or actually be a non-designated. And what you see here is again the average effluent values of what's in the wastewater treatment. The blocks in red are where we would struggle to meet those basin requirements that are listed for these three different ones. But what you see is that some offer some better possibilities of meeting those objectives versus Santa Ynez, especially with the TDS, the super low sodium and chloride conditions. And what we've focused on recently is really the Santa Rita groundwater basin, where we can really hone in on the chloride and sodium, but we're okay on TDS, we're okay on sulfate, we're okay on boron, and really the phase 2 project is meant to hone the treatment plant to be able to meet that total nitrogen limit, which the project to date was never scoped to meet any of the TDS chloride sodium objectives. So looking at this and in discussions with city staff and regional board, we feel like this is really the right way to go. And the question is why? Well, the why is because we can shift from trying to use the wastewater treatment processes to meet those sodium and chloride limits and instead focus on source water control at the groundwater level and in-home water softeners, or even blending with state water. And why do I say that? To show you these numbers up here real quickly, what we have here is TDS, sodium and chloride, sulfate, boron, looking at where the source water that comes into people's homes is coming from the groundwater or state water. And then what you see here are those values where the wells are, the groundwater wells, the groundwater quality is actually well below many of the Santa Rita sub-basin objectives, and the state water is, for the most part, pretty close to those objectives. So that's where we could tackle this issue by looking at softening the water that's coming out of the groundwater so that folks are less inclined to use in-home water softeners. And so there may be a lower cost option to try to balance this all out and not have to put in an expensive treatment at the wastewater treatment plant. So that's the way this is moving. Now, the way to implement all of this is what the Water Quality Control Board has required out of the city is to come up with this, what they call a time schedule compliance plan. And after these meetings with the regional board and talking about what's preferred, we've developed this plan that says, okay, we're going to start studying these different issues and how to tackle this and how we're going to get back into compliance. And this is the schedule that we've recommended the city put forward. And so you've got a multi-year schedule here, a plan here, that at any step of this plan, if we show we can meet compliance, then we don't have to do the rest of the planning and the studying. We can just move right into compliance. So, we've laid out multiple years to give the city plenty of time to implement these studies, to try to limit your cash outlay year to year and how you're going to do this. And the first step is to do the source water improvement study that we just talked about that we think is going to result in a path to compliance. Worst case scenario, it doesn't. We move into these other studies that talk about looking at different regulatory evaluations. They might, a lot of permits are written on concentration as opposed to, so concentration being like milligrams per liter versus what is a loading, which is like pounds per day, pounds per year. So these year 2 studies would look if the source water plan doesn't work, these second set of studies would look at trying to amend the permit to look at more of like pounds per day, pounds per year, so that if you went into, say, a recycle water usage where for part of the year you're sending all of your water out to recycle water users instead of into the groundwater, then your annual pounds per year load into the groundwater is not as high as if you were doing it 12 months out of the year. So following that would be looking at treatment evaluations, as well as then looking into, again, some recycled water usage or potable reuse studies, which right now you're part of a county-wide potable reuse study with Santa Barbara and some other entities to look if potable reuse might be advantageous for the county as a whole with some sort of regional treatment facility. But again, major goal would be this first study to look at source water improvements so that we don't have to get into these, year 2, 3, 4, 5 studies. But what I want to stress to you is that, we've got these next steps to kind of make a decision on which basin objectives we want to go forward with. I think it's pretty clear we want to go with Santa Rita. we've already submitted the plan, so we're in the process of revising it and submitting the new plan, which I just showed to you, to the regional board, getting their approval of that plan. Once they approve that plan, what they'll do is set interim limits for the wastewater treatment plant effluent limits that are something we can meet today while we work through this plan and show them that we're going to get to compliance. The Water Quality Control Board folks have agreed to meet with us with the USDA folks to show that we are on the path to compliance. They agree with that path to compliance, and we're going to get there eventually, so that then the USDA folks will allow us to resume the application process. And from there, we will start doing those studies for the path to compliance. And at the same time, or in some other parallel fashion, we can get the grant, the low interest loan, and start to move forward on the wastewater treatment plant phase 2 project that has been in the works this whole time. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, and I will stop sharing here now. I finally have the ability to do that. So yeah, happy to answer any questions you folks might have. Hopefully that was clear.
Question.
Sure.
What is on the source study that you're referring to, how much is that going to cost, and where's that? That's a prerequisite to going back to USDA?
Well, I'm hopeful actually that we can take the schedule compliance plan to USDA, and that they will say, okay, that shows a path to compliance, and they'll let us continue. I can't promise that, but they have said once we can show them that we're moving toward compliance, that we can continue the application process. They haven't said we have to show them that we're in compliance. So there's a differentiator there, right? And that's why I say I want to get the regional board folks talking with the USDA folks, so that, again, they can talk that they're confident we're going to get there. And our conversations with the regional water quality control folks is that they want to help us to get there. They don't want to force the city into an expensive treatment process or expensive, brine line kind of process. They want to find a way around that. So really think the source water plan can be the right way to go. As far as what the cost will be for the source water plan will be, I'm sorry I don't have that number in front of me. It's hard to, I'll tell you, it's hard to say we can do a good report for $25,000. It's not a lot of time there, right? And these things take a bit of time. You have done some reports in the past, which will help guide a future report. Is it 50,000 or 100,000? It could be in that range. I don't know. We haven't completely scoped it out, but I would tell you, our fees are based on time and material. They're not lump sum like to a general contractor. So we only charge you for the time that we spend actually, preparing these reports and working with the agencies and working with your staff. So we understand the city of Solvang, and we certainly want to work as efficiently as possible to get these things done for you.
Hey, Jeff. Right, Jeff. Thank you. And thank you for getting us all the way to this point. We asked staff to come back and help us understand what the financial obligation is and what we would be getting for the dollars we are being asked to approve. That's our action. And,
Sure.
In the absence of a statement of work, we didn't understand what that scope was. So that was the backdrop to have you join us tonight. But you clarified one thing, which is that this is time and materials, right? Because I don't think we understood that, even though it was a rate card and a projection of 450 some odd hours or something like that.
Right.
Can I just ask a really specific question on that? It looks to me like you just laid out the TSCP, right? Does that already exist, or is the work still to be performed, the studies? And what is the deliverable for the 106,000 we need to achieve?
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to answer that question. So the time schedule compliance plan is what the regional board required us to produce by June of 2023. So we've prepared the draft. We've gone through multiple meetings with them, and we are in the final stages of finalizing that plan and getting that approved by them. So that is work we've already done. That's what the amendment that is in front of you is for, is work that we've already completed and a little bit of work that is remaining to be done. And, because of the time crunch and the schedule, they sent this in April and said, you have to get this done by June. In their initial letter, there was a typo. It said June of 2024, and they came back and said, actually, we meant June of 2023, and we're not going to give you any extension. So, we were asked to immediately mobilize and get that work done. So what's in front of you is mostly work that we've already completed. Some work we have yet to complete, and it's time and material that we've put against completing the grant work that was our original scope of work. So this is pretty different than doing the grant work, but we want to help you folks out. We like working with the city. You guys are doing good things and trying to do the right thing. Honestly, if you ask my opinion, the regional board put you in a tough spot, and they've kind of put you under the microscope since then. So that's about it.
Okay, so Jeff, you were working at risk then, or?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and this 106,000 will get you current and get us to complete the requirement for the TSCP, is that correct?
It will allow us to complete the TSCP as well as allow us to continue working on the grant.
And do you have an end point in time that we would have this effort complete and the grant submission would be, fully turned over to USDA?
Well, I'd like it to happen tomorrow. We've been working towards this for a while now. I can't tell you a definitive schedule. We've been pushing really hard with the USDA to get everything in line by our original date was September, because at that point, previously we were at risk of losing the grant because of some of the updated survey information and population. We've been told by the USDA that that's no longer a risk. So we don't necessarily have an endpoint deadline that would risk losing the grant. What we have to do now is focus on getting that TSCP approved by regional board and convincing the USDA to allow us to finalize the grant and the loan. So I'm hopeful that that's, a couple of months, 3 to 4 months. Hopefully the holidays don't get in the way of that. We don't want to drag this out any longer. We want to get you the grant and the loan as soon as possible, because the longer that hangs out there, the more it's at risk. So we definitely want to push this as quickly as possible.
I appreciate everything you guys have done, but here's the real question. Maybe it's a combination for you both, Jeff and Randy, but if we're going to continue to operate time and materials, and the ball's moved once, or the goalpost has moved once already for us, at least once, right? So how do we know how much this project will, or this pursuit of grant will continue to cost us? How do we manage the time and material exposure?
Unfortunately, this is a situation, if it had been anticipated when we came before you back in April of last year, we would have included it. But as we're moving forward, the state, the regulators, whoever has oversight over this, says, oh, by the way, you need to do this, or we need additional information, and it's outside the scope of what Jeff and his group, and/or in other cases, what Joe and Meridian have done, and the goalpost gets moved. It's not anything we can control. The state has made it clear, we've got new waste discharge requirements, and we have to comply with them. And so we're trying to negotiate a path that's not even more cost prohibitive than what is before us right now. Jeff pointed out a minute ago that the regulators have said, we're not trying to box you into or force you into doing reverse osmosis, but reality is that's the only way to get all of those constituents of concern under the threshold. We need to provide what they've told us most recently, 2 or 3 weeks ago, was that if we're making a good faith effort to comply, they may cite us for not being in compliance, but they will not fine us. So we have to go through all these efforts and all these motions to get to that, and they may throw something else in here. They may tell us, you need to do this, this thing that we didn't anticipate. Maybe. I mean, actually, I envision at some point in the not too distant future, and by that I mean sometime in the next, say, 10 to 20 years, that they're going to say, we're not going to accept anything but compliance with the strictest terms, and reverse osmosis is the only option. I would not be surprised at all if the state does that to us. They haven't done it yet, and they said they're not going to now. That doesn't mean they won't do it in the future. So, we're small. Unfortunately, it was talked about by some of the folks earlier on the homeless issue. The state is mandating these things. They're not taking into consideration. We've got, I think it's 2,300 connections. So whatever our costs are divided by that 2,300 number. And, fortunately, we've got USDA grant, a very low-interest loan for the remaining balance that the grant doesn't cover before us, so we can defray some of the expense to our ratepayers, but ultimately, that's what the state of California is requiring from us.
Any other questions?
No.
Do we have any public comment? Public? I don't even have my speaker on, sorry. In that case, we'll bring it back up here. Thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate that and the information. This was something that, had been asked for by the council to understand what this additional request was. So at this point in time, I'm looking for a motion to approve Amendment 3 to the agreement with Carollo Engineers.
I'll move to approve the amendment.
I'll second it.
I would like, real quick, I'd like to thank him for extending himself on our behalf. We're not going to leave him swinging in the wind.
No.
And that's much appreciated. And at the same time, I want to make sure that this is not an open checkbook type of endeavor with the next problem, the next issue, the next gotcha. I'd like to put an end to that just as quick as we possibly can. And not chase the rabbit.
Upside down before we get noticed.
So,
Yeah. Well, if you noticed, that was a critical path schedule that he put up there. And that schedule had all of the connections and requirements as connected to it. So finish to start relationships and so on and so forth. You can see if anything moved, what else was going to move. They have apparently laid this out very well, enough to impress me, let me put it that way. So I'm not so concerned about it at this point. But we have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Brown?
yes.
Councilmember Clark?
One quick question or comment. In my 5 years, short 5 years here, I've never seen any consultant or any contract with any vendor ever go down. No.
No. Okay.
That was a no.
Councilmember Claudia Arona?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elizabeth Arona?
Yes.
Mayor Infante?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person tonight, but look forward to continuing to work with the city.
Well, now that had your PowerPoint got to working, we're fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 6B, please, Madam Clerk, if you would read that into the record, please.
Discussion and possible action 2, 1, approve 2 additional maintenance worker 2 positions to perform park-related duties for the Parks and Recreation Department. 2, adopt resolution number 231233, approving the budget adjustment for 2 new maintenance positions. 3, approve amended organizational chart to reflect these and prior approved amendments.
Council, any questions of this? I'm sorry, staff report. Let's start with that.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Prior to 2020, the Public Works Department consisted of maintenance, water, and sewer. Due to COVID, they split the Public Works Department into a Public Works Department and Utilities Department. And with that split came the maintenance workers were underneath the Public Works Department, and 12 employees were laid off, and the staffing has been inadequate, and services to the residents and tourists has suffered since then. Currently, the maintenance workers are assisting with the parks duties. Once the Parks and Recreation Department was restaffed with the Parks and Rec Director, that department needs 2 maintenance workers to perform the park's duties, and which include maintenance and mowing and stuff in the park, and then also cleaning for the special events, and making sure the planters and stuff are maintained with all the flowers. Based on the applicants that we received, there could be a maintenance position that we hire for, or we could hire parks maintenance. We did put it out to the staff to see if there was any interest, and there were 2 staff employees that are currently in the maintenance division that were interested into moving to parks. Funding the 2 maintenance positions will eliminate the need for the current parks lead position, which will offset some of the expenses for the 2 new positions. If the 2 positions are approved, the maintenance workers will be able to focus on the maintenance duties, not the parks, reducing the burden on the staff and eliminating some overtime in the maintenance department. The budget of $296,509 for salary and benefits is for 2 maintenance step 2 positions, which allows for flexibility and growth within the positions and the department. If you approve it tonight, the city manager would have the final approval on what positions and what range those positions are hired at. The organizational charts that is attached reflect the new positions and the previously approved HR specialist, which was replaced the HR manager position, the accounting assistant position, and the Parks and Recreation Director position. Council may not decide to approve these 2 positions, and the fiscal impact on the general fund will be the $296,509. And a budget adjustment is required.
Thank you very much. Questions? Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Does that 296, Wendy, I'm sorry, does the 296, and I'm sorry I don't know this, that's not including CalPERS, right?
It is.
It is?
Yes.
Fully loaded.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's salary and benefits.
Okay, and that, all right, that's
At the-
retirement too.
At the highest,
step, yeah.
highest maintenance range,
I know I had
And
the
step 5.
formula, correct, I
Yeah.
get it. All right, thank you very much.
there's also a blue folder that contains the amended resolution. The biggest change is that it allows the city manager to decide what positions should be filled.
Wendy, what's the value of the offset, the cost savings for avoiding the hire on the parks lead position?
That I don't know.
That's
I
included.
didn't, yeah.
Oh, this
Well, wait, so the 296 is not, I'm sorry,
No,
the 296 is not a net then?
no, because with the parks leader, no, it's not net. There is a decrease in that, but
I didn't figure out how much that
But
would
it could be close to almost half of that then.
It's one person as opposed to two, but rough and tough.
Yeah.
Rough and tough number,
Oh, I'd like to know that.
like 100K?
I think the parks lead,
I think it's important.
no. I mean, I could look up the salary survey. Somebody could look up the salary range on the website.
If I
I
could add.
could go
Mr.
get it
Mayor.
really fast.
Well, my initial reaction was to say no to adding
Mhm.
$296,000, but I wish we would have, I would like to know what the offset is. So when you talk about fiscal impact,
Mhm.
if we're eliminating one position, and that's in the 60 to 80 to 100,
Mhm.
then we're only looking at 200.
It is more money than one parks maintenance.
I
too.
understand
Yeah.
that, correct. Yeah, you're eliminating one and adding two a little bit on the next higher level.
Well, there's one more question while we're on the subject of the math. The job description actually included some sanitation responsibility in facilities. Does that have an impact on our janitorial contract? Does it reduce the obligation there? Any other savings here?
Order supply, where are you? What? Which
Sorry,
bullet?
page 49, examples of duties.
Right.
It's about the third bullet.
They do some janitorial type service currently. There is was some discussion during the mid-year or the mid-budget cycle adjustments to do to bring all of the janitorial services in-house.
Did you find it?
We intend to study that more thoroughly during the upcoming budget process, but it certainly is part of their job duty, potentially part of their job duties.
So Randy, you're saying there might be more, there's potential for other savings?
Yes, absolutely.
I'll take that too.
And if I might add kind of just some additional, we don't have enough maintenance workers currently. The reason why, if you look around town, you see a lot of fit and finish things aren't done. There's weeds growing all along the cracks in the sidewalks. There's suckers around some of the trees. The issue about the speed sign we talked about a little while ago. I learned, after we spoke on Friday, and I talked to staff yesterday, or I guess earlier today. Wow, the days run together anymore. That we actually have 3 radar signs in inventory. We purchased them some time ago. We just haven't had the staff availability to install them. So we're doing the best we can with what we've got, and by and large, we're doing okay. But the fit and finish things, the extra things, we don't have the time with the staff ability. Creating the park and rec department, recreating the park and rec department, and putting the director in place. As we started looking at dividing the staff up, we went, wait a minute, we don't have enough people now. What are we going to do? So that was kind of the impetus behind this. This request to fund 2 positions at the maintenance worker 2 top step is, again, we're not going to go there. We've got a very experienced person and all that stuff. The reality is actual budget impact will be something less. Looks like she's doing the quick math to figure out what this cost savings is for the not having to hire the lead. But it's definitely needed, and allowing the maintenance worker 2 gives us the flexibility. We may move, as she pointed out, there's a couple of people currently doing the maintenance work that may opt to go into, especially if they have the opportunity to go from a maintenance 1 to a maintenance 2, they're likely to jump over, and there'll be experienced staff to help keep that going, and then we'll go outside and hire people for the public works maintenance. So the flexibility, the job descriptions are largely the same. There are a couple of small technical differences, but the pay is exactly the same, regardless of whether they're parks or public works maintenance.
Wendy, I wanted to ask if you'd mentioned that there was cleanup after an event and things of that nature. Are we charging sufficient deposits to offset these costs?
Jenny's over there nodding.
Well,
Yes.
that's my question, I don't want this to be a cost benefit for somebody's party. if those deposits need to be retained because they're left in disarray, does that get resolved?
It does. We charge them out at $97 an hour, so that covers all their benefits. And the special event organizers who are putting that on are paying those fees to pay for our staff.
Perfect, thank you. Any other questions?
No.
It doesn't appear we have any public comment, and we don't have anybody on Zoom with a hand raised. So we'll bring it back to the council. We are looking for an approval of the maintenance worker 2 positions and adopt a resolution 23-1233.
Do you want to know the difference? Okay.
Oh, you
so-
got it, Nick. I'm sorry.
So for one maintenance worker 2, it's $148,253. For one parks lead at the same step 5, it's like 151,
So
151,000.
they're very, very similar.
So you basically, 2 for 1.
Yeah.
Is that a way, 2 for 1?
The difference between the salary ranges was like $300 and something a month.
Where do I send my resume?
Okay, I'm still looking for a motion to approve all of this.
I'll move that we approve item 6B and the 3 elements with that.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Clark?
With the situation that we're in, 1 would be great, but for 2, no.
Councilmember Claudia Arona?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elizabeth Arona?
Yes.
Mayor Infante?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1.
Thank you. And I just wanted to add to, in case anybody is listening, my comments were not to be derogatory toward anybody currently doing the work. There's just so much work that they can't do it all. So thank you for this.
I think, we got that. We understood.
Appreciate that comment. Okay, we have AB 1234 report outs. Anybody have anything to say? No. Excellent. In that case, I'm closing this meeting at 9:12. Thank you very much.
Meeting.